generation, he was in a tough spot. In fact, this whole family was in a tough spot because of the choices of their parents. You've got Jacob, who had basically four wives. Well, that's a recipe for disaster right there. You men don't say amen, okay? But I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. And he had two sons by his favorite wife, Rachel. That's the one that he saw, fell madly in love with, and worked 14 years to get to marry her. He worked 7 years and was tricked into marrying the sister Leah, and he worked 7 more years to earn Rachel. So he worked 14 years to have the right to call Rachel his bride. So she was a much loved woman, and she had two sons. She had Joseph, who we're studying today, and she had Benjamin, the baby brother. And Rachel died in childbirth with Benjamin. And I wonder if that has anything to do with why Benjamin was not Jacob's favorite. Quite possibly he couldn't look at Benjamin without thinking about Rachel dying. Where with Joseph, that was the first baby that Rachel had, and that would have been his first son by Rachel, and he was his favored son. Then we had Leah, his other wife, the sister of Rachel. She was the woman that her daddy deceived Joseph into thinking on his wedding night that he was marrying Rachel, and he married Leah instead. And he had 6 sons by Leah. And then there were Zilpah and Bilhah. Those were the handmaids of Rachel and Leah, and they both had 2 sons each by him. So that was 4 sons total with those two women. So he had 12 sons. He had some daughters. We know he had at least one daughter. Other than that, we don't know how many more daughters he may have had. But you've got 12 sons by 4 different women. There's sibling rivalry in all families except for those who only have one child. There's always sibling rivalry. That's just a part of our human nature. But can you imagine having 12 boys with 4 different mothers involved and trying to keep the peace in the family? It's probably not going to happen. That's a pretty good inference there, Tyler. I'd say you're dead on. It's probably not going to happen. There's not going to be a lot of peace in that family. And all they had seen, especially the older ones, all they had seen their entire life was rivalry. Their mothers were rivals with each other. Rachel and Leah had competed for Jacob's attention. You know, they even bribed each other. You know, let me have him tonight. I need to have some kids. You know, that was kind of their way of having some rivalry. So here they are. They've competed, and these boys have seen that rivalry among their mothers. And so they know how to be rivals. They're not very good at being brothers, but they know how to be rivals. And so we're not sure about Zilpah and Bilhah. They were the handmaids because they just kind of did what they were told. So we're not really sure how involved they got into the rivalry issue. But we know that Leah and Rachel have been rivals. So you've got what we call today a blended family. And blended families are tough. They're tough. Anytime you have a step parent and then those children, it can really get kind of a slippery slope trying to deal with that and trying to not be the wicked stepmother or the wicked stepfather, you know. We have those fairy tales where they're labeled as the wicked stepmother. So, you know, it's kind of hard sometimes to avoid that. And so you have all this stirring up trouble. And then you have Joseph, who is at the wonderful age of 17. For those of you who have never dealt with a 17-year-old male, I'm telling you, good luck. They know everything. You know, they get to that age around 17 to 18 years old. If they're a late bloomer, maybe 19, that they think they own the world and the world's all about them and you can't tell them anything because they've already learned everything they need to know to survive in the world. And then at some point they get out into the world trying to make a living, and they figure out maybe Mom and Daddy did know more than what I thought I knew at 17. So this story opens up with poor old Joseph, who's at that age of 17. He probably thinks he knows everything. And he's the youngest of these brothers, with the exception of Benjamin. So he's got one younger brother and 10 older brothers. And he's going to tell all about how these brothers need to operate their lives. Well, that's probably not going to go very well. There are several things involving him that would have upset his brothers. In verse 2, he tattled. So he became the little tattletale. You know, he's going and telling his daddy what the brothers are doing wrong. They're supposed to be taking care of the sheep, and they're doing this, doing that. We don't know what they were doing, but he gave Jacob an evil report on his brothers. He told on his brothers for whatever it was he perceived that they were doing wrong. And like I said, we don't know what they were doing, but you know, that wasn't very wise on his part to run and tattle to daddy. Probably wasn't very wise, but he's 17. You know, he's going to make that mistake. In verse 3, something he really couldn't help but probably encouraged. Verse 3 tells us very simply that his daddy loved him more. It tells us very straightforward. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. His daddy loved him more. And then verse 4 tells us that his brothers saw his daddy loved him more. So it wasn't just one of those things of they kind of secretly have this relationship that, you know, they kind of know you're my favorite, honey. No, it's broadcast enough that the brothers know it. So it's like, here comes the golden child, which doesn't go well when it's the golden child that's tattling on you. And then to make matters even worse, his daddy decides he's going to make him a coat. And that coat of many colors, if you study this out, that coat of many colors signified that you were somebody who did not do manual labor. It was something you would have given to someone who didn't have to really work hard for a living. So they're not out tending sheep. They're not out cleaning up around the camp, because that's manual labor. That's for the others to do. So here Joseph is parading around in a coat of many colors, showing his superiority to his brothers. I'm better than my brothers are. Here's my coat to prove it. They can go tend the sheep. I'm just going to run back and forth and check on them and run back to daddy and tell them what they're doing. He's basically put into a position of being a supervisor of his older brothers. That's tough too. Ever dealt with somebody younger than you being your supervisor? Ever dealt with somebody younger than you being your supervisor and they had no knowledge whatsoever of the job they were supervising? Woo, been there. That was an experience. Take a person who's been in an occupation for 10, 15, 20 years and put somebody that's just been educated for that position as a supervisor and them start trying to tell that person what to do. It can be very frustrating, very frustrating. And sometimes we want to fight back when really we just need to go ahead and follow their orders, let it fall apart so they can realize they don't know everything. Well, that's kind of, you know, what's going on here. He's supervising his brothers to some extent, and he has no experience with keeping the flock. He's the favored son with a coat of many colors. He doesn't do manual labor. But he's running back and forth to check on them and run back to daddy and tell what they have done. These other sons would have all been in most likely their 20s, maybe even into their 30s. Reuben was the oldest. He may have been as much as 30 or more years old. We don't really know exactly how many there were between all these kids. And with it being 4 different women, who knows? They might have been having babies, within months of each other. So we don't really know. But we know that they were older than Joseph, probably at least in their 20s or their 30s. Think about being that age and having a favored 17-year-old tattling and being treated better than you are. Because people in their 20s and 30s are all about making a name for themselves. That's the stage you are in life. You're making a name for yourself. You're learning how to use your independence to be the person you're going to be. And here this 17-year-old is running back and forth, tattling on the brothers. Not in a good situation. Let's look at verses 5 through 11. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaf stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. So here Joseph has these 2 dreams. One of them is of him binding sheaves of wheat. So he's taken what we would call hay or grain of some sort, and he's tying it up in bundles. He's bundling, baling is what we would do today. He's bundling these sheaves of wheat. And he sees in this dream his sheaf of wheat standing straight up, and his brother's sheaves of wheat bowing down to his sheaf of wheat. This is a dream from God. This is a prophetic dream of what's going to happen in the future in Joseph's life. So the dream was from God. And what does he do? He tells it to his brothers. Now, there's no indication that God told him to go tell his dream. So why did he tell it? I think he told it because he loved bragging. He was boastful. He was proud. I believe he was. Wearing that coat of many colors, Daddy's favorite, and now I've got a dream that you're all going to bow down to me. Let me tell you about it. That was not very smart. That was not wisdom. Did you know sometimes God's going to tell you things you need to keep to yourself? You need to keep it to yourself. Sometimes you need to be careful what you share with people. And Joseph should have used some wisdom and not share. They already hated him. How much more do you want them to hate you, Joseph? Go ahead and pour some more gasoline on that fire. Now they hate him even more. And then if that's not enough, after that reaction, he has another dream. And this time it's the sun, the moon, and the stars, which is Daddy, Mama, must have been one of the stepmoms because his biological mother, Rachel, was already dead. Daddy, Mama, and the brothers bowing down to him. There's his star, the sun, the moon, the other stars bowing down to him. And what does he do? He runs and tells them that dream, and he's got to tell it to Daddy too while he's at it. Daddy, let me tell you how important I am. That's what he's doing. He's boasting about his position in life. He's telling, and his daddy rebukes him. His brothers hate him even more, but his daddy is thinking on what Joseph said. No doubt, Jacob recognized greatness in his son. I believe he had enough discernment. He recognized greatness in his son, but he reacted to it in the wrong way. He helped to bring damage to his family by acknowledging that greatness that he could see in his son. He recognized potential. You know, we recognize different levels of potential in children in our lives. But don't ever make one feel like their potential is any less important than the other. Because it's all of us together that make the world work. And so that's part of the mistake he made. Those brothers out tending those sheep were just as important as Joseph was. So here they are, those sheaves bowing down, the sun, the moon, the stars bowing down. And those dreams are not accepted by the brothers. And Joseph lacks the wisdom to know what he needs to be doing. You would think he might start figuring out to fly under the radar and not let those brothers be upset with him. But does he? Absolutely not. Let's look at verses 12 through 20. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. So once again, we see Joseph's position in this family. The brothers are out taking care of the flocks, and he's home with daddy. He's a 17-year-old. He could have been right out there in the fields with the brothers just as well as they could have. He's plenty old enough not to be under daddy's wing. But he's held back at home, and these brothers are out feeding the flock, and Jacob, Israel, he wants a checkup on what's going on. So he sends Joseph to check up on the brothers. According to Bible scholars, Joseph would have traveled about 5 days for a total of about 75 miles. So he would have walked for about 5 days for a total of about 75 miles before he would have reached his brothers. And his purpose was to check on his brothers and animals and report back to his father. Now, the interesting thing about this is he's got this coat of many colors. He could have left it at home because he's going to be walking in a dirty environment. 75 miles for 5 days. But does he leave his coat at home? No, he wears it. He wears it. He goes out into the fields and he's walking, and everybody that sees him is going to know who he is. Oh, they may not know him by name, but that's Israel's boy. That's that one with the coat of many colors. And here he is, proudly going on his hike to meet the brothers. And just take a look at what happens. It says, And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. What his brothers did does not make it. What Joseph had done to upset his brothers does not make what his brothers did right. But we can understand their frustration. You've got a 17-year-old tattletale brat of a brother running around proud of his coat, proud that he doesn't have to go 75 miles on foot and take care of the flocks. He can just hang out at home with daddy. He's got easy street. And then he has these dreams of you're going to serve him, which is totally opposite of the ancient custom. The younger brothers served the older. So he's trying to turn their world topsy-turvy, and he's showing up. I can imagine probably on their way out to feed the flock, when they got 75 miles away from home and things got hard, they were probably saying, well, at least Joseph is not here to tattle on us. And then they look up, and what do they see? Here comes the dreamer. Here comes the golden child. Here comes daddy's pet wearing his coat. Let's just kill him and be done with it. That's some pretty heavy words. Joseph hasn't really done anything to deserve death. Maybe a good tail whipping or two, but not death. That's, there's just no justification for them murdering him. But they've had enough. They're just done. They're just done. There's jealousy in their hearts. And the Bible tells us that jealousy is as cruel as the grave. Jealousy will cause you to kill people. It'll cause you to kill them. If you don't kill them physically, kill their reputation. It will cause you to do that. And so that's what they're doing. They're plotting murder. Let's go to 21 through 27. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was coming to his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked. And behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. So Reuben has a plan. His plan is to save Joseph's life and get him back to his daddy. We don't know if Reuben had pure motives here, if he really cared about saving Joseph's life, or if he was afraid of the consequences of them taking Joseph's life. Maybe he thought he could earn favor with Joseph, and then that way it would be a route to earning favor with his daddy by saving his life. But for whatever reason, he convinced them, hey, let's not kill him. Let's just put him in the pit. And he had in mind of going back and getting him and delivering him back to his daddy. And then Judah has the idea of, no, let's not kill him. There's no profit in killing him. Let's sell him. Let's earn us some extra money. Well, now that's an interesting idea. I don't want to kill my brother, but hey, I'll sell him and let him be a slave. I can imagine Judah in his mind thinking, he'll finally know what it means to work. He's thinking he's helping exercise justice here. I'm bringing justice here. He's got by with not working all of his life. He's going to be a slave. He's going to know what it is to have somebody tell him what to do every minute. And so that's what they decide to do. Could have. Yep, absolutely. Just knowing human nature, sometimes you can kind of wonder. Yeah. Let's look at 33 through 36. No, wait a minute. 31. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors. And they brought it to their father and said, This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it and said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph was without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted, and he said, For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and captain of the guard. I can't imagine being as cold-hearted as these brothers were at this moment, because they took that coat of many colors that they knew their daddy would recognize. They ripped it up a little bit to make it look like he'd been attacked by some animal, put some blood from one of the goats on it to make it look like he had bled on that coat. And then they traveled 75 miles back home to take the coat back to their daddy for him to identify the coat. And they let him believe that their brother had been attacked and killed by a wild animal. And their daddy's there grieving. Their daddy's saying, I will go to my grave. I will die grieving for the loss of my son. And nobody speaks up. Nobody admits what they've done. Nobody says, hey, I'm sorry. We got a little aggravated with him. We faked his death. We'll go get him. They could have taken the money, probably, and bought him back, but they didn't. I can't imagine watching your own daddy, even if they were really, 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 really angry with Joseph. How could you watch your parent grieve like he's grieving and do nothing about it? Mm-hmm. And I can remember, this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, so I won't go long, but I can remember when my oldest brother was murdered. My dad was at work, and we made a phone call for him to come home, and my cousin who worked there with him brought him home. And all the way home, Daddy was asking LeBron, my cousin, what's wrong? What happened? Why are we going home? What's happened? And LeBron said, I couldn't tell him. And Daddy came in that house, and we told him what had happened. And I'll never forget what came from my daddy. That grief, that initial sound of grief over having a son murdered was just, it's something I can't erase, the sound of that, hearing that. And imagine that they're hearing that on a daily basis. They're hearing their daddy grieve and cry, and they're responsible for it. Because it was bad enough for me, and I wasn't responsible for my brother's death. And yet, here they were responsible for it. Yeah. And so, this grief, I'm like Brother Nathan, I believe it hung over those brothers. They knew what they had done. They had to face it every single day. And probably had to question themselves, should we try to go find him? They probably were thinking, should we try to go find him? Well, I don't even really know where to start. We just sold him to those people. We don't know where he'd be. And then what are we going to tell our daddy? What's he going to do to us when he finds out we've done this to his favorite son? And so they just held on to it. This entire family was affected by the sin of the people in this family. And for 20 years, Joseph would be gone. He would be gone from their lives. God would eventually bring them all back together, and he would mend their broken relationships. Perhaps you have, or you know a family that is so dysfunctional that it feels like things will never be right. Don't give up. Don't give up. I think that's the thing we can take from this more than anything, is that if you know of a family that's dysfunctional, don't give up. God can help with that. If you've been done wrong, don't give up. God's got a plan for the end of it. If you've done wrong, don't give up. God's got a plan for you mending what you've broken. Because sometimes we break things. And sometimes we have to suffer the consequences of breaking things. But God will take those things we break and he'll bring them back around for us to mend. So if there's a broken relationship anywhere in your life that you feel like it's worth mending, seek God. Seek God's wisdom and be blessed today. Don't be a part of this craziness. Be a part of God's plan for your life. God bless you.